hello again. This is time for another Book Thoughts, and we're going to keep it going with the Chronicles of the Dread Empire series with A Fortress in Shadow, which is a prequel duology. The two books in here are The Fire in His Hands and With Mercy Toward None. So, it's a prequel. So, what are we focused on? Well, we're telling the story of the three core characters that we talked about in the last Book Thoughts: Bragi, Haroun, and Mocker. This is, however, when all of them were young men, 16 to early 20s. The books take place over a couple years, so about that range. Haroun starts a little bit maybe on the younger side of that, a little younger than that even. And they're in three wildly different places. They have three wildly different. These are men who haven't met each other yet, and they're not even men yet. Really, they're still boys becoming men, becoming the men. Pardon me, becoming the men that we know from the original trilogy. Now, there are a couple really neat things about this book. The first really neat thing about these books is that all of the major events you already know about from the original trilogy. Every major occurrence in here was already used as a offhand backstory comment that was just flavor, really, to tie the three main characters together. Here, those all get strung out into one interesting and compelling narrative. So, we're doing a prequel. In the original trilogy, we know that El-Murid has taken over the Desert Kingdom and expelled Haroun, and at one point led a great religious war that was meant to sweep the world, but was stopped by, in part, no small part, by Mocker, Haroun, and Bragi. In this book, you actually get to see those events play out. So we start off with the Desert Kingdom pre-El-Murid, and we actually see El-Murid rise to power. We see him being his religious revelation, which is really the old meddling wizard that's led by the Norn, in that really tenuous backstory, just kind of hinting at the edges of things, way that Glen likes to tell his stories, or at least likes to build his worlds, at least. And then we get to see that all play out. We get to see why, or not, we already knew the why, but we get to see how Bragi gets chased out from his homeland up in the far north. We get to see just how crappy Mocker's young life was. And we get to put these all together and see how it all comes together. And it's remarkably satisfying, despite the fact that everything's been laid out for you. You know every event, but you didn't get to see the spectacle before, and now you get all the spectacle. Now, this being a prequel and El-Murid being present in the sequel, or in the original trilogy, you kind of know how this ends. But I don't think that detracts from it at all, and that actually gets to something that I will talk about in my next Book Thoughts, which is about the sequel trilogy, The Wrath of Kings. About this book, about these two books, though. So I mentioned in the original trilogy, the first book is a heroic adventure. The second two books are war novels. I would say that these two books, I'm sorry, are both more on the heroic fantasy side. War is an element. There is definitely, movements of armies. Oh, this battle tactics, or why this battle was won, or whatnot. But the focus is definitely still more on the heroic efforts of our three. Well, they're probably the series protagonists, I would say. That gets dicey, but I'm comfortable calling them that. So Glen's worlds are fantastically gray. They're that fantastic realism just is strung throughout the everything he writes. So there are powerful wizards, there's powerful magic or whatever, but it's never powerful enough to dictate the shape of society, and society adapts to it, and people die, there's suffering, there's all of the normal things of a world at war with this tech level that you would expect from a very in-depth history book. They happen here. But there's something that is almost easy to miss if you don't pay very close attention in the entire Dread Empire structure that I think raises these books into something special, not just a very good set of novels. In the original trilogy, it gets explained to us in just dribs and drabs that Star Rider, the old meddler, is in some way bound to the Norn. Now, if you don't know who the Norn are, traditionally speaking, they are basically the Nordic version of the Fates. They very similar in a lot of ways, but they were the ones that kind of provided the role of the Fates. They're in this universe. So are the Fates. And they're in opposition to one another. So happenstance and a little bit of Deus Ex Machina, just little bits here and there. If you pay attention, a lot of those really seem to play out as a structure, as a war between the Fates and the Norn. The Norn have a singular representative in the Star Rider, and he's meddling along. He's pulling out these really long, elaborate plans, and it's really fun to try to piece those together. Even when you have, jumping back here, we know what the Star Rider did previously from the original trilogy, but we jump back here, and you start to see that maybe it didn't work the way you thought it did. So that's a lot of fun to see. But then the Fates just pull the strings a little bit. That arrow could have killed that enemy that's not important, or that enemy that was important, and it kills the enemy that was important. And generally you'll see a lot of just minor comments around those times of, oh, the Fates are on your side. Fate was on your side today. But lowercase Fate. But I think if you read those moments as uppercase Fate, you end up with a very interesting setup where it's the Norn versus the Fates. The Norn have a unwilling and captive agent, and the Fates have unwitting and free agents. And the whole series battles out between those two. I'll bring this up again when I talk about the next trilogy, because reading the sequel trilogy is when this really all clicked for me. But looking back, it's throughout all of it. Now, we mostly focus in these books on Haroun and Bragi. Mocker's definitely there. Mocker's definitely important. But Haroun is really gets the most screen time, which makes sense. This is his origin story. We don't get to see a lot of him later because he's very busy. But yeah, so if you're interested in how the third son of or the fourth son of a lower tier nobility, man of lower tier nobility, became the king in exile, the king without a throne. This, I think, provides a nice political story, a nice war story, and a nice heroic fantasy. So if you really don't like the war novels that the second two books of the main trilogy are, but you liked the original heroic fantasy novel, I think you would also like these two. Well, that's really all I have to say about these two, because they are much more united in theme, in topic, in style. If you want to see more thoughts about the series as a whole, please go back to the video I have on the original trilogy. I'll have it pop up somewhere here, I guess. And then keep your eyes posted. I will very soon do a shorter. It'll probably be longer than this thoughts on the sequel trilogy. And the sequel trilogy is buck wild, just buck wild. We get full on spy novels that are also, but they're focused on. I won't spoil it. Subscribe if you want to see, if you want to be warned about that. Please leave comments. Tell me if I'm giving you too much information or not enough to decide what kind of book this is. What, whether it's for you or not. Like I said, the first video will kind of fill in a little more about Glenn Cook's writing style. It's very direct. It's these kinds of things. But otherwise, yeah. Leave me comments if you liked it. Like it so I know that people are liking it. And I will catch you guys later. Bye.